great to see everybody again. We had a tremendous number of conversations at Dreamforce, lots of engagement, and there were a lot of sophisticated customers that already had Shield and we're looking at refining and optimizing, which is really cool. But we also had lots of conversations with folks that were just starting to get familiar with Shield. And so as we came back after Dreamforce and talked to our marketing folks, we came up with an idea. Actually, marketing genius, I think.
Geniuses, experts.
Back to the basics.
That's right.
Back to the basics. So today we're really going to focus on Shield 101. Kind of what is it? What does it do? How should you be thinking about using it if you're not already using it? All right, so quick intros. I'm Brian.
I'm Pete.
I run go-to-market activities, the relationship with Salesforce. Pete is a co-founder, chief product officer, and heads our security services. So we've got some unique experience within Salesforce ecosystem from a security and privacy standpoint. We've got a variety of five-star solutions that we bring to the market to help companies that are bringing more sensitive data into their Salesforce orgs. And so for any of you folks that are out there that are thinking about continuing your evolution of Salesforce and bringing in more sensitive data, security and privacy needs to be on the forefront of those considerations as opposed to something after the fact. And the cool thing is that those are the conversations that we're having with folks in the marketplace and specifically at Dreamforce. Yeah, do a quick recap on Dreamforce. Cool. We were featured in a number of Salesforce presentations. We did a session with our customer Intuit on platform encryption, and then we were also in this demo jam. So let's talk about security.
Okay.
All right. What is it? Why haven't people implemented it? And what's the quickest path to value that you should be thinking about if you have Shield or you're getting ready to purchase? Make sense?
Checks out for me.
All right, Pete. What is it?
All right. Shield 101, right?
101.
I get to drive for once.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Driving slides.
You press the button.
Yeah. Cool. So we're going to take this from the highest level down to breaking down each component of Shield, explaining what it's trying to accomplish. We will talk through, as you saw on the previous slide, a little bit of where do people hit stumbling blocks, things to look out for, as well as we'll talk through approaches to kind of get through some of those things. So keep it high level. Happy to answer specific questions as we go through this. And obviously, going to be around to do deeper dives as needed. So cool. So what is Shield? So at its core, Shield is Salesforce's premier security offering. It layers on top of the existing application services and infrastructure services that are available with Salesforce. So when you become a member of the community and you purchase the platform, you get all these services included with it. Salesforce Shield is an extended layer of security services that live on top of the rest of that. A little bit more specifically, Salesforce Shield is a product suite. It's made up of 3 separate products that could be purchased individually, or if you buy all 3 of them together, that's when it's kind of Salesforce Shield. So it's platform encryption, which a lot of people, I think, start out understanding what Shield is from platform encryption, and that really is encryption of the data at rest. So in the database at the Salesforce data center, the information being encrypted on the disk there. This isn't TLS, this isn't HTTPS, this isn't all the other kind of encryption in transit stuff that we're talking about. This is really at the storage level. There's event monitoring, which is the ability to kind of have these ongoing monitoring and insights of things that are going on inside your org. So we'll do a deep dive on what that means in a minute, but in general, that's what it's trying to cover for. And then Field Audit Trail, which is really where Salesforce is focused on data loss prevention. So those are the 3 primary products that make up the suite. And then what we'll do next is we'll just drill into each one of those and say, okay, well, cool, what does that even mean? So we'll start with Field Audit Trail because it's probably the easiest for most people to understand. It's very closely correlated with field history tracking, which everybody is pretty familiar with if you've been working on Salesforce, right? So what you see on the screen today is, you've got your account object and you've got this account history object, and this is what you're used to seeing, right? So you set a field to be tracked on the account, somebody goes and changes it, and immediately there's a copy of that moved down to the account history table. That information will live in that history table for 18 months, and then it will go away. So that's how field history tracking works today. You can track up to 20 fields per object, and you can see up in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, that there's a couple of primary differences when you start talking about Field Audit Trail. So with Field Audit Trail, instead of just being able to track 20 fields per object, you can now track 60, which is more than enough for most use cases. And then they introduced the concept of this history retention policy. So a history retention policy gives you the ability to fine-tune how long that information is going to live in the account history table, and also in this new field history archive. And that is a big object, capital B, capital O. Big objects are accessible with asynchronous sockle, and in general, the idea is that as that history flows off to the account history table, like it normally would, after whatever your configured number of months for the account object are, that information will then actually move over to the archive table and come out of the history-related list on the record page. So this is really good for kind of forensic research later and surfacing information for legal issues or compliance or whatever it might be. You can retain that information up to 10 years. A lot of our clients say, whoa, hold on, I don't want to keep information for 10 years. I only want to do 7 or 5. And the good news is that history retention policies are configurable to do that. And after that number of years that you've configured, that information will get purged out of the big object and you'll be in good shape. So that's Field Audit Trail. That's kind of what it does. We'll talk a little bit about how you use it in a little bit here, but in general, that's what Field Audit Trail is. So we'll jump on from Field Audit Trail off to event monitoring. So event monitoring is always running in the background of your org. And in fact, pretty much every org on the planet has some degree of event monitoring. That's how, like, the last login timestamp gets captured for your user list, stuff like that. There's a login history page in the setup menu. If you purchase Shield event monitoring, then what you actually get is 45 different event types. So like login and log out is an event type. And it's just tracking it 24 hours a day. So it's log in, log out, report exports if you want to keep an eye out for when people are dumping a lot of data out of your system. And one of the cool things for a lot of developers is it actually captures some performance metrics around Visualforce pages and Lightning pages and Apex classes. That information gets stored for up to 30 days in your org. And it gets stored as something called an event log file. Now, event log files can be a little intimidating when you start to get used to them, and most people need to access them using this workbench utility, or this is where a lot of people start. They can be kind of hard to interpret. The good news is that when you purchase event monitoring from Salesforce, they do include an Einstein Analytics app that you can configure to kind of get to this information a little easier. Even if you don't have Wave or Einstein Analytics, you will actually get this anyway, and so you'll still be able to kind of dip your toe in the Einstein Analytics pool and start to play around with it. For some people, or for a lot of people, Einstein Analytics doesn't quite go far enough around some of the monitoring and alerting that they want to do. So there are a lot of third-party products out there that can help kind of close that gap. Some of the big players are like Splunk and Fair Warning. But so in general, this is what you get when you purchase event monitoring, and then there are ways to kind of extend it and take it to the next level as needed. But that's what event monitoring is. It's tracking all this stuff for you and giving you the ability to start kind of interacting with that information so you can keep an eye on what's going on in your org. So that's number 2. So number 3. Number 3 is platform encryption. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but at the base level, platform encryption is the ability to encrypt the data at the database tier. So it stores in the database as encrypted ciphertext. And on the surface, it can be pretty, it's like, okay, cool, I checked the checkbox, now my data is encrypted. That's cool. But when you start to think about what platform encryption is doing below the surface, there's this robust key management services that you can do. You can bring your own key, so you can bring in your own keys to be able to drive the encryption based on stuff that you've generated. And then every time you're accessing information, whether you're writing or reading, that data is going through this pretty advanced key derivation service. So I like to point this out to, for the admin's perspective, it's like I click this box, I hit save, but you got to keep in mind there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes. So that is kind of at the base level, that's what platform encryption is. So those are the 3 components. We talked about Field Audit Trail, we talked about event monitoring, and we talked about platform encryption, and that's what they are.
So who typically, so you're an organization and you have Salesforce, who are the typical people that care about Shield? Kind of what's the typical process? Does it typically come from a Salesforce product owner? Is it typically a Salesforce product owner trying to get sensitive data in?
It depends on the organization.
Or something, or who are the typical constituents, I guess? Maybe that's a better way to
It really
ask
depends on the organization, but typically, at some point an email will come out because the CISO will be like, oh, is Salesforce covered by all these policies we've been making for all of our other systems? And that will kind of go off to an admin or somebody who will be like, I don't know. And then they start digging in, figuring it out. But really, it's kind of across several constituencies. So it's legal, it's compliance, it's information security, it's admins. And then a lot of time it does get driven by, okay, well, now we know what our policies are and we're trying to accommodate those things, but the business needs some additional functionality that really requires some super sensitive information. So you got to kind of level up and take it to the next step.
Yep.
So
cool. Yeah. And actually, that brings to mind one of the other use cases that we're seeing more frequently now is for folks that had a variety of stovepipe systems, whether that be Access Database, Excel spreadsheets, and using Salesforce as the platform and really using a standardized security and privacy framework within Salesforce and starting to consolidate other stovepipe applications that weren't aligned to that security posture. We're starting to see more and more of that, and it makes sense because it is, with such a robust platform that provides its key capabilities and easier for organizations that are trying to scale to do things once and get it right once and then move other systems into that, as opposed to having to align to GDPR, having to align to their security posture in 20 systems.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. If we can centralize, we can simplify, right?
You got it.
So cool. So that's the kind of what is it. And now we'll get into kind of the second promise of our webinar here today, which is, okay, well, cool, but so, what do I do with it? And we do this all the time. You might have noticed from our webinar series that Shield is kind of a big part of our life across the security and privacy world that we work in. So some of the things we hear really commonly, right? So a lot of people get a little concerned because some of the features are API only. Things like history retention policy management and field audit trail and some of the other things like that. So sometimes that can get a little scary for people, and they're like, whoa, I don't touch APIs, I'm just an admin. So we try to make that a little simpler on our side. A lot of people haven't implemented it yet because they don't even know where to start. They're like, okay, cool, I've got it. Now what do we do with this thing? And we'll try to answer some of those questions in a minute here as well. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this one, which is, I bought it, it's on, right? I'm good. And it happens all the time. And there might be some people on the call right now who have been thinking about that. So yeah, it's not. So event monitoring is kind of automatically capturing data, but the field audit trail stuff is going to be doing the basic configuration out to 10 years. And then platform encryption really does take a fair amount of work. So you got to work on that implementation process. And then, so there's a lot of well, wait, so if I actually do this, what's going to happen? Are the users going to feel pain? Is there going to be surprises going out to other people? What's going to happen, right? So we try to make that a little simpler too.
Yeah, and in the background, you might have seen a poll that we posted, and similar to the conversation that we had at Dreamforce, I'm just trying to understand where people are on their journey. Are you just starting to get familiar with Shield? Do you have Shield and are trying to figure out how to use it, or what are the specific use cases, or are you kind of fully implemented? And so, as you go through, and great to get some feedback on where you are in your journey so that we can better formulate future webcasts to align to those needs.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, it looks like we're getting good results too, so that's pretty cool. Thanks for responding, guys. It helps us kind of tailor where we're starting, so that's great. So a couple of slides on some of the recent changes or things that are coming up. When I talked about field audit trail earlier, I mentioned that information goes away after 18 months or whatever you have it configured as, and then it moves over to the archive table and then goes away. For standard field history tracking, if you've got the 18-month kind of process going, the standard out-of-the-box field history tracking, and you haven't purchased field audit trail yet, just a heads up, as of now, those jobs that clear out that information have not been running on the Salesforce side. Interesting fun fact. that's going to change. So in spring 19, that information is going to start getting purged at 18 months. So if you're considering field audit trail for reasons related to those history retention policies, you probably want to get on top of that pretty soon. So quick heads up on that, some changes coming down the pipe. And then, oh yeah, so platform encryption, we wanted to bring up some of the new stuff, right? So we talked really high level, like what is platform encryption in general. At a deeper level, there are different ways. I love this slide. Thanks, Emmett. So there are some deeper things going on behind that key derivation process and the other stuff that we looked at before on the iceberg slide. And one of the big differences is that there's, when you're dealing with encryption, there's something called an initialization vector, which is why you see the what's our vector picture down there. But so there are ways to create what would be called a deterministic encryption scheme. In general, the way it works is that deterministic encryption has a static initialization vector. And what that means is that when we write the same value to the database, we're going to write the same ciphertext each time, which allows you to start doing some filtering. We do have some limitations when it comes to deterministic encryption on the platform encryption side. And the biggest thing is that you can start to use fields in some kinds of filters, like certain types of SQL queries, but really just direct matches. So does this thing exactly equal this thing? And the key is that it's case sensitive. And so in a lot of cases, what we're recommending people do with deterministic encryption is leverage it for fields that basically don't have letters in them. So whether it's a social security number or some kind of, or a phone number, things like that, where comparisons can be more reliable, and you don't have to worry about case sensitivity. So that's some of the new stuff coming down the pipe. A lot of people are starting to come to platform encryption now because the deterministic is possible. So we want to make sure that we talk about that a little bit. And so now what, right?
Should come back to the poll just to give an update. So of the folks on the line, looks like almost 60% don't have Shield quite yet, and so are considering it. 11% have Shield and haven't implemented. 21% have implemented some of the components, and then 11% of the folks are fully implemented. So the back to the basics idea seems to be relevant for today's conversation, but those last things on deterministic and probabilistic are some of the, I call it nuance, that aren't quite basic, but as you make progress, will make more sense as you continue on in your research.
Perfect. And I actually saw a question pop up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question. So do you see companies implementing Shield, specifically encryption, to support GDPR compliance?
Yeah, I think it is a good question, and I think that the way it's worded is important. So it can help support GDPR compliance. We've had clients come to us that are like, I need encryption, and then I'll be GDPR compliant. That might be a little bit of a stretch. GDPR is one of the few regulations that actually specifically does call out encryption as a recommended practice inside of the documentation. It's still just like any other regulation. It's most important to have a really defined posture that's well documented and be able to explain it and show that you're supporting it. But we do see a lot of people coming to platform encryption by way of not only GDPR, but the California Privacy Act as well.
Good question. Keep it coming.
Yeah, definitely. So let's run through just a few more slides. I know we're coming close on time, but we got time, right? And so the path to value. How do you start to take advantage of Shield? So really what I'm going to talk to is just commonly, what do we see people, how do they go through this journey and in what order to help, especially if 58% of us don't have Shield and they're just interested. If you decide that you are interested and you want to pick up Shield, where are you going to start? So with Field Audit Trail, it's really those two things we talked about earlier. So what we recommend people do is, first things first, review all the fields in your org and make sure that you're tracking that sensitive information. This can be informed by a full data classification where you go through field by field by field and make sure you understand everything you have. But really, if it's super sensitive information, make sure you're tracking it. So we recommend people start there and then configure the history of retention policies in their org. So that's how many months does it live in the online, how many years does it live in the offline. And the reason we do it in that order is because when you buy Field Audit Trail directly out of the box, you have the maximum amount of tracking is already configured for you. It's up to 10 years. And so then you can start to fine tune, but you really want to start getting that information tracked as soon as possible from a data loss prevention perspective. I guess shameless plug, we have a product that helps with that. I know, who knew? So we can certainly help you with that. As I mentioned earlier, most of that stuff is API only. So if you're really familiar with the metadata API and that's cool for you, go for it. If you need a little hand with the user interface, check out Field Audit Trail Cockpit. And then moving on into event monitoring. So event monitoring, really what we do is we advise people get that Einstein Analytics app up and running, get some dashboards configured, maybe some simple alerting that you can do in there. Get that going, see what you've got, in your org, and then review some of the limitations and what your goals are with event monitoring. So, are you an organization that really needs advanced alerting around certain activities? Are you an organization who, needs to retain event logs for significantly longer than 30 days so that you can do time series tracking over, months or years? If you are that type of organization, then start to look into some of the other options, but you're still going to really want that core of event monitoring running and doing its thing, and then you can add on to it with some additional offerings from other third parties. We don't have a product there, so we're happy to talk to you about it and make guidance, but we don't have a product offering for that. So now platform encryption. Platform encryption is kind of the big player in the room. It does take a pretty careful exercise. So we recommend that you go through a 3-phase approach. So starting out with data classification, and spoiler alert, we have some products to help with this too, but really with platform encryption, it's important that you get a full data classification in your org. So many times we do our workshops and we talk to people and we discover information in the org that they didn't even know they had. So it wouldn't have been on there. We need to encrypt this list. So data classify it first, figure out what you got, then move into business impact assessment. Business impact assessment is, okay, well, platform encryption comes with a 60-page implementation guide. Take that implementation guide and start to figure out what's going to go sideways in your org. Are these fields referenced in queries or formulas or process builders or report filters or list views or whatever? We can help automate that with a product offering, but even if you decide not to use our product, you just got to go down that path. So data classification, business impact assessment, and finally, you will likely have some mitigation or remediation activities to do to make sure that those fields can be encrypted by platform encryption, and then going through the implementation process, which is really not so bad once you've gotten through making sure that all your fields are clear to be encrypted in the first place. So that is and Shield Security Cockpit is our product that helps with platform encryption. And
shameless plug.
Yeah, see any of our other webinars to check out demos and all that other good stuff. We talk about that a lot. So then just bear this in mind. Shield is an ongoing product. It's not just a set it up and walk away thing. Your security kind of never sleeps, right? You really want to stay on top of this stuff. So with Field Audit Trail, make sure that when you add new fields, you're classifying it, you're making sure you know what it is, tracking history if it's important. For event monitoring, make sure that somebody's actually looking at the information you're capturing. A lot of people stand up these dashboards and then never look at them again. So make sure you've got a business process in place for that. And also make sure you're reevaluating, is it meeting your needs or do you need to extend beyond the core capabilities of the platform? And then for platform encryption, very similar to Field Audit Trail, as you add new information, new fields to your org, make sure that you're reevaluating them on a regular basis, keeping them classified, make sure that you're rotating your keys on an appropriate basis, and with every release that Salesforce makes, they're kind of modifying the capabilities of platform encryption, normally extending it and making it so you can encrypt even more information. So you'll want to reassess on a regular basis with each Salesforce release. So, gosh, I said a lot of things this time.
You did great. Yeah, I know we had a bunch of more questions came in, but for time purposes, we'll take those offline. Emmett and Devin, if we can follow up with them directly.
Totally.
Anything else, Pete, to add before we do some more shameless plugs?
Just mostly shameless plugs.
And I think the important thing is just like your use of Salesforce, your use of Shield is a journey, and so this is not something where you're going to take. If you, for those that haven't purchased Shield or haven't fully deployed it, you can't think about this as you're going to do this all at once and it's going to be a 30-day process. Really prioritize what are the key use cases you're trying to accomplish, and then put the right focus, get the right constituents in the room, and solve those use cases first so that you can get value and then address secondary and tertiary drivers. And there's some analogy about an elephant. How do you eat an elephant or something like that? How do you eat an elephant, Pete?
One platform encryption at a time?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One component of Shield at a time.
I like that.
Yeah. Someone used the Ferrari analogy on me the other day.
Oh, nice.
For those that didn't see, there's a Ferrari analogy in our theater session with Dreamforce. Check it out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a variety of assets. Follow us. Let us know how we can help. We want to make sure that you're as successful using Shield, using Salesforce, and doing it in a way that's aligned to your security and privacy posture.
Very cool hats.
We've got some hats. We'll be at both LA and New York here later this month. LA end of November, New York in December. We're here in San Diego now, and so with that, let's go to our hat drawing for those that remember us. Emmett, back to basics, marketing genius.
Hat delivery.
Hat delivery. All right. A lot of names in there.
Yeah.